Moscow, 1925. A man crosses the Soviet border in the dead of night. He carries forged documents and a mission that could change the course of history. His real name, almost no one knows for sure. The world knows him as Sidney Reilly, the most legendary spy of all time. What he doesn't know is that he will never leave the Soviet Union alive. Welcome to the story of the man who inspired James Bond, the master of espionage who fooled entire governments and cheated death so many times that many believed he was immortal. Before he became the legendary Sidney Reilly, he was a young man of mysterious origins. Some documents suggest he was born as Sigmund Rosenblum in 1874 in Odessa, in the Russian Empire, modern-day Ukraine. Others claim he was of Irish descent and named Georgy Rosenblum. This confusion was no accident. It was the first act in a life devoted to constant reinvention. What we do know is that at the age of 19, he left the Russian Empire. Some say he fled to avoid military service. Others say he had to escape after helping revolutionaries evade the Tsar's police. After passing through France, Reilly arrived in London, where he began weaving the network of contacts that would support him throughout his career. Charming, intelligent, and gifted with languages, he quickly gained the trust of influential people. In London, Sigmund Rosenblum met Reverend Hugh Thomas, a Royal Navy chaplain. Thomas was married to Margaret Callahan, a wealthy woman several years older than him. What happened next reads like a spy novel. According to records, Reverend Thomas died suddenly of kidney failure in 1898. Just a year later, Margaret married our protagonist, who by then had changed his name to Sidney George Reilly. Rumors at the time suggested Reilly might have had something to do with the Reverend's mysterious death. What is certain is that the marriage gave him not only a considerable fortune, but also a new British identity. He was no longer a Russian émigré. He was now Sidney Reilly, a respectable English gentleman with connections in London's high society. Margaret's wealth allowed him to start various businesses, including an information agency that was, in reality, the perfect cover for his espionage activities. By this time, Reilly was already on the radar of British intelligence. Reilly's official career as a spy began in 1901 when the legendary William Melville, head of the British Secret Service, precursor to MI6, recruited him. Melville saw in Reilly exactly what he needed: a man fluent in multiple languages, able to blend into any environment, and ruthless enough to get the job done. His first major mission took him to Port Arthur in Imperial China, just before the Russo-Japanese War. Disguised as a ship merchant, Reilly gathered crucial information on Russian defenses and leaked it to the Japanese. He later traveled to St. Petersburg, infiltrating Russian industrial circles. Using his charm and language skills, he became a representative for a German weapons firm, granting him access to top-secret details of Russia's naval weapons program, which he passed on to London. What made Reilly unique was his total immersion into false identities. He didn't just wear a disguise, he became another person. One day, he could be a wealthy British businessman, the next a German engineer, and the next a Russian aristocrat. By the time World War I broke out in 1914, Reilly was already a legend in intelligence circles. The Secret Service sent him to New York with a seemingly impossible mission: to sabotage German supply shipments from neutral American nations. In the U.S., Reilly established an import-export company as a cover. Using bribes, blackmail, and his signature charm, he successfully disrupted numerous shipments destined for Germany. He also collected intelligence on German agents operating on American soil. In 1917, after the U.S. entered the war, Reilly was sent to Russia. The country was in full revolution, and the British Secret Service wanted to know what was truly happening. Reilly's mission was to assess the situation and determine if the Bolsheviks would remain in power. Here is where Reilly's story took a shocking turn. Instead of merely observing and reporting, he decided to act. Convinced the Bolsheviks pose a threat to the West, he began plotting their overthrow. Reilly's plan was bold: assassinate Vladimir Lenin and Leon Trotsky, the Bolshevik leaders, and install an anti-Soviet government. To do so, he recruited a group of Latvian officers from Lenin's personal guard. The coup was set for August 30th, 1918. That day, Lenin was scheduled to speak at a Moscow factory. The conspirators planned to arrest him there and take him to a secure location for execution. Meanwhile, other units would seize control of key government buildings. But fate had other plans. Hours before the speech, Lenin was shot twice by a revolutionary named Fanya Kaplan in an unrelated assassination attempt. He survived, but the attempt triggered the so-called Red Terror, a massive crackdown on perceived enemies of the revolution. Amid the chaos, Reilly's plot was exposed. The Soviet secret police, the Cheka, arrested several of the conspirators. Reilly, using one of his many disguises, escaped Moscow and fled to Finland. This failure was a devastating blow to Reilly, both professionally and personally. For the first time, the master of deception had been deceived. But more than that, he developed a deep hatred for the Bolshevik regime, a hatred that would eventually lead to his downfall. After his escape, Reilly spent several years in Europe, working on various missions for British intelligence. But his obsession with toppling the Bolsheviks never faded. During this time, his personal life was as complicated as his professional one. Though still legally married to Margaret, he had relationships with several women in different countries. One was Nadine Zaleski, a beautiful exiled Russian aristocrat who shared his hatred of the Bolsheviks. In 1923, Reilly met Pepita Bobadilla, a Spanish actress and former wife of the famous explorer Sir Hubert Wilkins. Reilly fell madly in love and, despite not being divorced, married Pepita in a secret ceremony. This marriage marked a turning point in his life. For the first time, he seemed ready to leave espionage behind and settle down with Pepita. He bought a house in England and spoke of retirement. But fate, or perhaps his own restless nature, had other plans. In 1925, Reilly received news that reawakened his old obsession. A secret organization inside the Soviet Union was plotting a coup against the Bolsheviks. What Reilly didn't know was that this supposed anti-Bolshevik organization, known as Trust, was actually an elaborate trap created by the OGPU, successor to the Cheka and forerunner of the KGB. Operation Trust was one of the earliest and most successful disinformation campaigns in espionage history. The Soviets created a fake counter-revolutionary organization within Russia, complete with forged documents, double agents, and encrypted communications. The goal was to identify and neutralize real anti-Soviet groups abroad. For years, Trust fooled not only Western intelligence agencies, but also many Russian émigrés who believed they were supporting genuine resistance. Reilly, despite his experience and legendary instincts, fell for the trap. Perhaps it was his hatred of the Bolsheviks clouding his judgment, or maybe he was just tired of living in the shadows and saw this as one last chance to make a difference. Despite warnings from colleagues and friends, Reilly insisted on personally traveling to the Soviet Union to meet with the leaders of Trust. He believed his experience and connections could be decisive in finally toppling the Bolsheviks. In September 1925, Sidney Reilly crossed the Soviet border. His goal: to meet with the supposed leaders of the anti-Bolshevik underground and coordinate a Western-backed uprising. But the moment he set foot on Soviet soil, he was under surveillance. What Reilly didn't know was that every contact, every safe house, and every plan had been fabricated by the OGPU. From the beginning, he was surrounded by double agents. The trap had been sprung. On September 27, 1925, while traveling near Moscow under a false identity, Reilly was arrested. The OGPU had finally captured their most wanted foreign spy. For over a year, Reilly remained imprisoned in Moscow. Some say he was held in the Lubyanka, the infamous headquarters of the OGPU. Others claim he was moved between secret facilities. What is known is that during his captivity, he was interrogated intensively. The Soviets wanted to extract every bit of intelligence they could: names, contacts, operations, even British government secrets. But Reilly didn't break. True to his legend, he maintained his silence until the end. On November 5, 1925, Sidney Reilly was executed with a gunshot to the back of the head in a forest near Moscow. His body was never recovered. The Soviets kept the operation secret for years, only admitting to his death decades later. Legacy of a Phantom. The news of Reilly's disappearance shocked the world. For years, British intelligence refused to confirm his death. Rumors persisted that he had escaped or was living under a new identity in South America. Some even claimed he was still secretly working for MI6. But the truth is darker, and perhaps more poetic. The master spy, who had built his life on deception and illusion, was ultimately deceived himself by a more ruthless and patient enemy. Reilly's story would go on to inspire generations of writers and spies. Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond, cited Reilly as a major influence. Like Bond, Reilly was suave, multilingual, deadly, and always one step ahead, until he wasn't. Today, Sidney Reilly remains a symbol of the golden age of espionage. A man who lived dozens of lives, yet left behind no grave. A shadow who moved history from behind the scenes, and who vanished into the very fog he had once controlled. Outro. The price of the game. Sidney Reilly lived like a ghost in a world of lies, double-crossing revolutionaries, seducing diplomats, toppling regimes, and vanishing without a trace. But in the end, even the greatest spies get played. The Trust operation was more than a counterintelligence victory. It was a brutal reminder that in the great game, the board can flip when you least expect it. So was Reilly a hero? A traitor? A con man chasing danger for the thrill of it? Or was he something even stranger, a man who lost himself inside too many identities? We may never know the full truth. But one thing is certain. If the walls of Lubyanka could talk, they'd whisper his name. Sidney Reilly, the ace of spies. The man who inspired James Bond and died a prisoner of his own game. If this story pulled you into the shadows, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life spy stories that are stranger and darker than fiction. And tell me in the comments, was Reilly a genius or just lucky until the very end? Stay sharp, watch your back, and remember, in espionage, nothing is what it seems.